The other thing you might look at, you might go, okay, well, maybe you don't want this wall sticking all the way out like that. And so if you wanted to constrain this background steel inside of this other sign area, like the painted rusty steel area, then what I need to do is go over to the 3D area, the 3D panel, and I need to select where it says dark rusted steel. And I'm not going to start moving stuff around. What I want to look at is I want to look at the dimensions. So if I look at dark rusted steel mesh in my 3D panel and I go over here to coordinates, you can see that the X coordinates, so it's, and these are the dimensions, these are coordinates, 1280 wide by 720 tall. Okay, but then if I look at the logo, you'll see that it's 819.99 wide by 605 tall. And I could make this 820 just so it's easy. It's an easy number. Okay, and so then that'll change that. And so now if I wanted to try to fit that other thing inside, then I could go 820 by 605. Let's start to work with that. I'll choose my dark rusted steel, and let's see what happens if we say 820 by, I think it was 605. And then you see that it like isn't sticking out any further, any longer, okay? And so maybe that would be a better way to have that representation. And then you can also see that it's casting a shadow in the back, which is kind of cool. So that's all good and well. I'm going to go ahead and save what I've done so far. Okay, so let's go back over here to layers and let's see what we've got so far. If I were to, just turn off this painted rusty wall layer and move it down, let's just move it down below Hedgehog. Then what you'll see is that I've got, this Hedgehog background layer, and you've got this sign sort of sitting in this space in a three-dimensional way. And it's not purely convincing though, because, the plant life, the plant matter is kind of sitting, it's sitting underneath the sign, like it's being crushed. So one of the things that we could do is we could actually reproduce this Hedgehog layer. I'm going to make a copy by dragging it down to this page icon, and then I can drag it up on top of the logo. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to rasterize this layer. I don't have to, but I'm going to, and then I'm rasterizing the copy of it. And then if I turn it off, you see, that sort of gets rid of that Hedgehog completely. Now, what I think that would be probably the most helpful for me though, is if I were to make a selection of this outline, of the sign right now, and then start to use that to figure out how to mask out the Hedgehog copy. All right, because what I need to do is be able to allow some of this plant matter to come up on top, but I need to be able to know exactly where to mask that out. So what I'll do is I'll take my Polygon lasso tool, which is over here, and it might be showing your normal lasso tool. So if you click and hold it, you can select the polygon, which will allow me to get some really simple selections based off of this. And then I can click in all these corners and grab my corners of my object here, and then making sure that I get the shadowy area. And I'm going to grab these edges of this object and go ahead and complete that. And I'm going to go ahead and save that selection, by the way. So if I go up here to select, I can say save selection, and I'll just call it boundary. I'll call it boundary 1, because maybe we'll add to this periodically. So now what I can do is I can go in, and now that I've got that basic selection, I can turn on my top Hedgehog layer, and I can see what it's going to mask out if I were to start, just basically erasing, or if I were to mask everything else out. But I'm going to blow this up a little bit and show you what I kind of want to keep, though. I want to keep these little tendrils that are kind of coming up in front, right? And I want to keep this part, and I don't know, I think maybe I won't keep anything back here because it's clearly in the background. But I do want to at least keep the stuff that's sort of cropping up above, okay? So let's do this, and this thing where we turn on this quick mask mode, all right? so we can see where that current selection is, and this way I can also go ahead and start using my paintbrush to add to the selection. Okay, so now if I choose my paintbrush tool, it's not going to literally paint pixels. It's not painting red paint. The red is showing me everything that is going to be masked out. Okay, and so right now it's just easier to choose what's going to be masked out than what's going to be masked in. So if I choose my paintbrush tool with a black foreground setting, then I can start to paint, and then I can also choose my brush size and the hardness. I'll start off with a pretty hard brush, maybe not quite that hard, maybe somewhere around there, and I can start to paint in some of this area to add, basically to add to the selection. And I'm going to have to adjust my brush size a little bit, and I might want to zoom in for more detail in just a second, but for right now this is not too bad. Okay, and then so you can see how it's easy sometimes to add stuff with the paintbrush more than it is to like try to use other tools. Whenever you're in quick mask mode, it's really a really beneficial thing. Okay, and so I can come up in here, and I still have to come back over here too, but for right now this is okay. And you want to make sure that I am able to sort of transform some of those hard lines. And we're in there. Okay, and then now is where I'd probably want to go ahead and change my brush size. Let me grab that one little edge right there, and I'm going to lower the brush size a little bit so that I can get some more detail in here. And I think I might like that little piece too. Looks like it's coming off the same piece of clover. And then I could also, you know, I can't really add this because it's coming out from where this would be behind the sign, but all this other stuff is coming up in front of the sign. Let me lower this a little bit more, and then you can see here I can add my selection right here with the smaller brush. And I've got this little piece of leaf that's still missing. That's probably okay. And then let's just see how this looks for right now. And so I'm going to go now jump out of quick mask mode. So I click on that, and you see how it's changed my selection. So I'm going to go back now, and I'm going to and I want to show you something. Look what's happening. If you look up close, you might go, wait a second. You know, it's including all of this. Well, it's not necessarily. Let's just jump back and make sure in quick mask mode. Oh, and it actually is, and we don't want. Oh yeah, that is okay because it's outside of the frame. So it's okay that this is all included right here. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into select. I'm going to save that selection, and I'll call this boundary 2. All right, and if I zoom back out now, what I can do is I don't want to just add a mask. If I add a mask, it's going to mask out the wrong things. See, it masks the wrong things completely. So I'm going to undo that. What you want to do actually is you want to go up here to select, and you would want to say inverse in this case, so that it's selecting everything else, and it's going to keep everything else except for what's inside of this rectangular area. Okay, and then now what I can do is click the mask, and then you see that it shows this sign inside of it shows it inside of the scene in a little bit more naturalistic way. And if you wanted, you know, you could probably come and soften up this edge a little bit so that it didn't look so harsh. If you wanted to do that. The other thing too that you might want to do is that you'll notice that the shadow. Let me show you how the shadow. If I close this, if I turn that off, see how there are some shadows that get cast from this? I don't want to completely lose those shadows. So one of the things that I can also do is I can also modify this mask if I want, if I decide that I don't like that. Here's my mask. So if I select my mask in the layer panel, I can go over here to channels, and I can start to modify this. And you can see it's called a Hedgehog copy mask. And then if I turn this on, what you can start to do is I can start to, and this is not quick mask, I'm actually modifying the existing mask that's on that layer, but I can take my paintbrush tool, and then I'm going to bump up the size significantly, so let's just bump that up quite a bit. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the opacity so that the opacity is turned down, and I can sort of slowly start to allow more information. And the reason that this isn't such a huge big deal, to be real honest, is because if you look at this layer, excuse me, over here, and you see that this hedgehog layer back here, it still has the pixels that I care about, right? All right, but you can maybe you can't see it, but it's just now starting to show some of that shadow, and it's looking a little bit more realistic. So if I go back to my channel, turn it back on, and I start adding more, see, because I've got these layers of opacity set up in my opacity up here for the paintbrush, then what it's doing is it's allowing me to sort of gradually make that shadow stronger. If I turn that off again, you're starting to see some of these shadows overlapping, right? Which is pretty cool. So you can start to get the shadows that are being cast. Now some of these edges are a bit too harsh, so if I want to go back in there, I can always turn on my eraser tool, and I can turn down the opacity, and I can start to, let me turn the brush size up, and I'll turn the hardness down all the way so it's not so hard. And then let's turn the opacity down a little bit more, and then I can start to soften up these edges here where the harsh lines are for these shadows. All right, and let's see what that does. And that makes some of these a little less harsh, which is good. Okay, and so that's starting to look not too bad. All right, and then if you really wanted to go in further, you could start to make all of this transparent, and you could add a sky background or whatever it is that you want to do. But I think that right now I'm going to leave this the way that it is. And you know, there's sort of this irony of this picture because it's on a very kind of macro scale. You've got this really small clover, and you know, the idea is that you've got this production company that's called Majestic Productions, yet it's a tiny sign and it's rested. And so, you know, there's sort of this irony that exists in there. Now, the next thing that you would want to do, you know, maybe you might feel that your light sourcing is a bit strong. So there are things that you could do to you know, change some of that. So if I go back here to choose my logo composite and go back to 3D, you know, you can always go back to your environment and look at your light sources. And so, like, for instance, maybe we want to knock down the intensity on the spot. And let's try that. Let's try to make it like maybe 60. So it's, you know, a little less intense. You know, really it's up to you. And then, you know, you could take the infinite light, and maybe I want to turn that down quite a bit too. That's a little bit too much. Let's turn it back up to like maybe 100, but we don't have to have it as bright as like 120% now that we've got that additional spot on it. And so, you know, really it's kind of up to you, like where you want this. And then also the other thing is maybe I want to change this color so that it is a little bit warmer even still, you know, and that might be a little bit too much. We might be better somewhere in this range and just a tiny bit brighter. And then that starts to be a little bit more realistic. So you can start to change your colors around as you get it in the scene that you want it to be in. And then the other thing too is that, you know, if you wanted to make more plant matter here to kind of obfuscate sort of the bottom of this, you could. It's really up to you how deeply and how far you want to take it. But I'm going to go ahead and end the demo here because that gives you a pretty good basis to start.